You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we ask you any questions. You have the right to have a lawyer with you during questioning. If you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you before any questioning if you wish. If you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you have the right to stop answering at any time. That's your Miranda rights.
Leo, you're not going to get much out of me after saying that. I'm just going to shut up after that. You just read me my rights. Like I have to set a good example here. I have to remain silent.
Yep. I'm here with Mr. Ziad Youseff. This is your megaphone today. I'm super excited to have you on the show. We've known each other for a long time. For a number of reasons, and we'll get into that, how we met in the first case.
Oh, we are going to get into that.
Why not?
I'm super excited to be here. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah.
I think that this is probably going to be one of the most influential podcasts people can listen to. So I'm fortunate and blessed to know you. And I'm glad we're at this stage right now where we can have a conversation face to face like this.
Likewise, we've had a lot over lunch. We've had a lot over coffee in the office, everything. And today is the day where we can put this out there and provide so much value that I think both of us want to provide for our community in so many ways. So I'm super excited that you're here today. I'm super excited that you made it down the dirt road to this beautiful red barn down here and found us.
I love it.
And let's dive right in.
Let's do it.
Mr. Ziad Youseff. So tell me about yourself a little bit more. You've been in Bellingham since the 90s. You have this business called MyTrafficMan.net.
Yeah, I think most people would recognize the radio voice. This is Ziad
So
Youseff,
good.
Founder of MyTrafficMan.net.
So good.
And the Legal Care Center of Whatcom County.
Yeah.
But before all of that, I was just a kid who took his parents' hands and flew to America with them at 5 years old and learned English in first grade and kindergarten and lived in an apartment with my brother and my mom and walked to school every day with her and walked home until I went to high school, and then she drove us to school and Dad drove us home. Before all of the fancy courtroom expectations people have about Ziad Youseff and MyTrafficMan.net, there was just this insecure young man who was trying to find his identity in the world.
So tell me about, you came from Lebanon.
Yes.
You came when you were 4 years old, right?
I was 4 years old. We moved here in 1977. The Civil War in Lebanon officially had broken out probably the year before. And my grandfather had already moved here. My great uncle had gone to university in Georgia in the 50s. And I had relatives that lived in Houston. So we came to Houston. So in 1977, we moved from Lebanon to Houston. And my uncle owned an auto parts store down there.
Amazing. What was
Yeah.
that like, coming from a place where there was a civil war, where it's a completely different culture, to coming to a place like Houston? What was that transition like for you as a young kid?
Well, I've got so much respect for the great state of Texas. I always tell people I was Texan long before I was American.
Yeah.
I didn't naturalize until 1981, and there was 5 years where I was just all Texas. And here's what Texas was for me: Southern hospitality.
Yep.
People showed up to the door with cakes and pies, and that's all I remembered. Every neighborhood we moved into, that's what I experienced. My dad tells a story about, I learned English at school. Dad learned English at the gas pump. Mm-hmm. He worked full service at a gas station, and people taught him English because all he knew was yes and thank you. Mm-hmm. And so people would ask him to check the oil, and he'd say yes. And they'd say, no, check the oil. And he'd say, well, thank you. So they'd get him out. They'd get out of the car, show him what it meant to change the oil, or check the oil, I'm sorry. And he'd learn English that way. But reflecting on it now, I'm 46 years old now, and I'm reflecting back on 40 years ago. What I realized was I did feel like I was an outsider working his way in. People were always nice to me, though. Nobody treated me like an outsider. But my parents were so afraid of what the new world would bring that they created this very tight and protective bubble. You know, Mom walked us to school every day, but that was part of the bubble.
Was that something that was a tradition in Lebanon for you? Was she walking you to school? Was it a safety issue with the Civil War, or was that just a I want to be?
I think it's just an overprotective mom.
Yeah,
I think
I know all about that.
Right? So like I'd be in school,
Yeah.
and my friends would tell me, "Yeah, we just saw Miss Youseff roaming the hall. She's just checking in on us to make sure we're in class."
Yeah. Not to mention they drop off sandwiches still to this day.
Yes, they do.
It's amazing.
My mom cooks lunch every day, and Dad drives it down to the office. And regardless of who's in the office, Dad knocks on the door, gives them a nice greeting, delivers my lunch, and goes on to see my brother. And that's
beautiful.
That's to this day, yes. Yeah. But I realized that growing up in that environment made me feel somewhat isolated from the community that I was growing up in. And I started to feel like I had to earn my way into that community. And what I learned was I didn't have to earn anything. They were welcoming. I just had to give myself permission to walk out of that bubble and into the community. And I did. And it's been great. It's been wonderful. I probably didn't realize that until I was 30, though.
So this is something that at an early age, you're telling me that you came into to Texas, to Houston, with this kind of this idea that you needed to earn your way into the community. Do you feel like that has affected how much you love your community and how involved you are in your community today?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, many immigrants will tell you that the opportunities that the United States of America gives to them are so much more appreciated. We don't take for granted that you can flip a light switch on and have lights come on, or turn a faucet on and drink from it. We don't, as immigrants, don't take that for granted. But then on top of that, we don't take for granted, we learn to truly appreciate that education is available to us. In Lebanon, not everybody gets to go to the school that they want to go to. There's a limited number of schools. You're not guaranteed. You have to test your way into it. You want to go to school here, it's guaranteed through high school, and then you have financial aid that gets you through university. And regardless of how you feel about financial aid, at least there's thousands of universities to choose from to get a higher education. And so I think the effect it's had on me is to make me so proud of having that opportunity. I think that I appreciate the United States more than anyone who might have grown up here and takes for granted the wonderful things we have here. Mm-hmm. And it's because I can go to Lebanon and visit my cousins and my relatives that still live there and know that they only have electricity 8 hours a day.
Tell me more about that. So why do they only have electricity 8 hours a day?
Well, the infrastructure was destroyed. I think it was 16 years of civil war, and Lebanon's a small country. Lebanon is, I think it's 150 kilometers long, 50 kilometers wide. It's not very big.
Mm-hmm. It's right there on the Mediterranean, correct?
Right there on the Mediterranean, right? It's beautiful landscape, beautiful territory. It reminds me a lot of parts of Northern California, but the infrastructure was destroyed. The power and energy and all of those systems that you would develop if you weren't being bombed every day, well, that was put on hold for 16 years. And it's been a real struggle to kind of bring those up to speed because they have to get their economy caught up and they have to spend their money correctly. And it still bothers me, though, because Lebanese people pride themselves on education. And there's not one family that isn't trying to get one of their kids to become an engineer or a doctor. And I still don't understand why they don't have clean water, because the technology's there. Right.
So do you feel like, you just mentioned that there's this strong push in Lebanese culture to be an engineer, be a doctor. Mm-hmm. Was there any sort of push from your parents for any sort of engineering, for doctor, lawyer?
Lawyers get the least respect in Lebanon. So
why is that?
It's not much different than here, right? So my parents wanted me to have a good education. They absolutely guided me toward education, but they never once told me I had to do something. It came naturally. It became something that I naturally was guided to. I think in the 5th grade, one of my teachers was like, "You argue so much and so well. You like to argue all your points. You should be a lawyer."
So not just a lot, but really well. You're good at positioning your point or understanding the other point.
And here's the other experience I had as a child. I don't know, do you remember being asked to do career day at school where you come dressed as what you want to be when you're like in 5th grade or 3rd grade?
I showed up as a pirate.
I came as president.
Oh,
I came as president.
I like that.
That's right.
All right.
Right?
That's what I'm talking
But
about.
I wasn't born here, so I couldn't be president. So my number 2 was firefighter.
Okay. Why'd you want to be a firefighter?
Because I wanted to be a hero. I wanted to be a hero. That's what I thought firefighters were. That's what I thought presidents were. And I was too fat to be a firefighter.
Why? What?
I'm a big man. I was a punchy kid too, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I'll just be a lawyer. I think there's something noble about being a lawyer. I'd probably been studying about lawyers in school. We've been reading about Abraham Lincoln, and I thought that was noble. But I really did want to. I had this drive to make a big impact as a young man, and I didn't like being told that I couldn't. But it was what it was. I wasn't born here, can't be president. So I'll just switch. I'll move on. I'm not going to sit there and dwell in it for too long. And that really stuck with me, that being a lawyer would work. And so when I finished high school, the practical side of my family said, "Well, you got to choose a profession that's going to be good for you if you don't go to law school." So I studied accounting at Western.
You're telling me about this.
Yeah.
So as far going back to that whole conversation about impact, there's the nobility of being a lawyer, because knowing you as a person, I know that you have a big megaphone and you're a campaigner and you're somebody that has a lot of you're powerful in that way, and you use it in a really good way. What is that? What did that mean for you as far as impact goes? What kind of impact did you want to make on people? What does impact mean to you?
Well, fortunately to me, impact meant good impact.
Yeah.
I wanted to see good in the world. I've always I recognized as a young kid I had a question about why I'm here, and that my purpose is for something great. And I can't pinpoint what exactly put me here or guided me in that direction. But when you start freshman year of high school, there's this initiation process, and I don't know if they're still doing it, but obviously bullying is a big issue in our schools. Well, when I was a freshman, they were initiating kids. They'd make them push pennies down the hallway with their nose, because they're freshmen, and so the older kids would come and tell the younger kids to do that. I didn't think of it as bullying then. We called it freshman initiation.
I remember it.
Well, I was a big kid, so I wasn't getting initiated. That wasn't going to happen to me. And so I remember one of my friends was getting picked on, and they were going to make him push this penny down. I'm like, no, he's not going to push the penny down there. And the kid that was threatening him to do that said, "What are you going to do about it?" And that's probably one of the first times when that stands out in my mind when I think about, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to beat this kid up? What am I going to do? But what am I going to do about it? I'm like, I'm just going to bring an adult to make a decision here. We're going to report this. That's what we're going to do. And that was the first time I had to make one of those decisions about, well, how are you going to make a difference here? You stepped in. Now what?
So you have this array of different choices. You have physical violence. You have, bring in somebody else that maybe can help, mitigate the situation.
Yeah.
You've got, you have a million different things you can do.
I wasn't ashamed to ask for help.
Yeah.
I wasn't ashamed to ask for help. I wasn't angry because I couldn't start a fight or wanted to start a fight. I didn't want to start a fight. I just didn't want to see the little man get picked on.
So impact to you, it sounds like, is being able to use your megaphone to be able to impact your community in a way that can either give people tools, connects people, resolves.
I'm a great facilitator. Leo, and I like to intervene.
What does that mean to be a facilitator?
I like to bring opposite sides together.
How do you do that?
I like to make it easy for people to come together. And it's to diffuse the tensions. I do that by diffusing the tensions. I recognize that people have insecurities and fears. And probably that kid picking on the younger kid had insecurities and fears. I just didn't know how to deal with them back then, so I asked for an adult to intervene. But now at this point in my life, I can intervene, and I do work to diffuse things. And I am willing to say things that might be controversial because I can diffuse people's fears about the controversy because I'm coming from a good place. So how do you do that? You recognize that all of us operate from core values. They don't have to be the same, but you have to get a gauge on what people's core values are. And if you got a gauge on what those core values are, you can help them understand and manifest those values in a way that also allows the other person to manifest their core values. And you know, one of mine is wisdom. One of my core values is wisdom, and the other is confidence. And there's a few more, but those two, I appreciate people giving me wisdom. And so I invite people to teach me. And if their opinion is different than mine, I'm learning. Mm-hmm. And I invite someone else to teach me with a much different perspective. And by listening to both sides, I'm learning something, but at the same time, both sides are getting to verbalize their different perspectives. And they're doing it to me. So in some sense, I'm sitting as a facilitator, a mediator, a judge in the middle where people are directing their attention to me, but really the other side's hearing it.
And you did something actually specifically. I think it was last year. You had this. Now I don't want to say networking group, but it was a group where you were bringing minds, people that had different core values, but some pieces in common. Tell me more about these mastermind groups that you guys did, and because this is
Leo, it was the most meaningful thing I had done in my life in many, many years, and it was so simple. I recognized that I was getting too much of the same perspective, that I'm surrounded in this silo of just the legal community and what the perspective of the legal community is.
So like a group think, kind of the same.
It is kind of a group think, you know, oh, this is our circle, this is how we do our circle. But at the same time, what I recognized was that I was having experiences that were not uncommon to someone else's experience, and I was having to process that experience by myself. And you know, in my work, we send people to self-help groups all the time. We recommend that they seek out an AA group or an NA group. We do DUI defense. We deal with addiction. And we refer people to self-help groups. This was a self-help group for me on levels beyond addiction and more about day-to-day struggles. What was my life experience today? Oh, my life experience today was that I spent 12 hours at work and didn't get home and think about maybe going for a walk with my wife. That's tough. But I'm dedicated to the work. So how do I balance that? That's a real struggle. And I'm not the only one going through that struggle.
So you basically had a group, like let's say I think the groups were made up of five people, and maybe you had a real estate agent in there. You had somebody from another lawyer. You had another business owner, people that you felt brought value or it made impact in their own way.
I came up with a system. How am I going to get 5 people into a group? I picked one co-chair.
Yeah.
And I explained to the co-chair what the theme of the group was. It was about inviting people that we could trust. So I would want them to pick 2 people they knew so that they would feel the trust bond was there. And I would invite one person I knew. So the co-chair would invite 2 people. I would invite 1. We would become a group of 5. And we would be dedicated to simply sharing our life experience and allowing the other group members to reflect or examine that life experience through their perspective so that we could mine it for opportunities and they could mine it for opportunities in their health, in their authentic relationships, and in their financial prosperity. Once I knew people were committed, we switched to monthly meetings and we'd get together and just talk about what was your last week's experience.
Like opportunities, maybe they felt like they had done a really good job with their health, or they had been eating really well, or they had found a cool opportunity that was a good example of a place where everybody could come together and work together, or hey, I've got something I need your help on, or things like that.
Well, you know, one of the group members was selling their house and then deciding what to do after selling their house. One of the group members was was getting certified in doing breath work, which is this great new health.
Done it. Have you done it?
I haven't done it yet.
I
right?
did. I actually sat in with Briddick Webb.
Yeah, it was Briddick.
Briddick does breath work with Sandy Harmony, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm going to get out there and do the work with him, but he was explaining it to us. And it was an opportunity for us to listen to his perspective on health and maybe mine it for opportunities in our own well-being, in our own health. And we talked about financial opportunities, challenges the communities were having. Because I also, when I was leading the groups, was asking them to be prepared to bring up questions that are concerns in our community and start looking at what solutions we could bring. And I truly think at the culmination of all of that has been to have a much broader vision and perspective of what the problems are and how to approach solutions to them. And, I want to jump ahead just a little bit because I think after those groups, I was inspired to examine our housing situation and what the struggles people are having getting into homes.
Tell me a little bit more about some of the struggles that you're seeing that people are having in the community.
Well, people are paying probably about 20 to 30% more just to rent homes than they were 3 to 5 years ago. They're spending a lot more to do that, and it's made it more inviting to own a home. But owning a home comes with a huge debt commitment. There's a lot of money you have to borrow. And there's a lot of anxiety that goes around owing that much money to somebody else. And some people like their freedom of renting, but renting isn't necessarily the most viable option anymore. And I think that's been the conversation. Is there just housing in the community? And what are we doing to address that? But, as part of my work in Law Advocates, we did a diversity training under the leadership of Karen Phillips, who I'm so grateful to her. I just want to give her some credit because she made it the mission of, not the mission, her leadership was about bringing in some race and diversity training to our board.
So what does that mean, race and diversity training?
It just offers up a new lens from which we as board members in a civil legal aid organization can view problems in the community. And it was about looking at things from a more informed perspective of how systematically racism has worked to change the color and landscape of our community. And, one of the things that we learned about was that in Edgemoor, there were deeds that specifically wrote out in them whites only. And, so.
Wow.
Right? Well, right. They're still there. Not every deed over there.
This is just in Edgemoor.
No, it's not just in Edgemoor. There are other communities where those exist. And
do you think a lot of homeowners even know that that's what their deed says?
Most people who are signing on closing are probably just signing documents, but it's illegal to enforce those anymore, so they're pretty much ignored. And that's really what I want to do. I want to ignore them. But here's the idea I had.
Tell me about it.
That systemic racism that was implemented by writing it into deeds could be overcome with systemic love and inclusion.
What does that mean?
We could write into deeds language that says we as a community desire to be free from discrimination and hate on the basis of race and sex and religion and national origin, free from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, free from discrimination on the basis of disability or ability, physical and mental ability. And I think if we were to write that down in a deed, and record millions of them, Leo. I don't know. I know you're recording a lot. And I think if we just started adding one paragraph into every deed or deed of trust or any lease that gets signed in Bellingham and Whatcom County, we could then be writing the vision for our future. And 20 years from now, we truly could be free from hate.
That's beautiful.
It's so exciting to me. You heard it in my voice.
Monday.
That was Monday. I was on my treadmill and I'm just walking and I'm thinking, because I think through what's happening. I think through my world, and this divine thought entered my mind, and I knew I had to deliver the message. So I started calling every influencer I knew.
So who'd you call?
I called Ben Kinney. I called Shauna Olberg over at Savvy Bank. I called Carol over at Bank of the Pacific. I called Robert Lipston in Seattle. I called Deanie Hartman at Umpqua Bank. And I'm still making calls. I haven't had time. I had to.
And what have these people said?
They love it. They love it. It's been a natural reaction. Of course we need to do this. Of course we're going to do this. And I'm going to keep calling. I'm going to call on Wiku. I'm going to call on People's Bank.
You hear that, Wiku? He's coming for you.
I'm calling you out. That's exactly
That's
what
awesome.
I'm doing. That's exactly what I'm doing.
So this is an amazing message. I really appreciate you sharing that message. And I did want to jump back into, and we can come back to this. I wanted to jump back into, you told me a story about how you got here from Lebanon, how you guys got the money to make it to America. And I love this story.
Yeah.
What happened? How did you get the money to come here?
So listen, this is almost 41 years ago. I don't know if that was the actual money my parents spent on the tickets to get over here, but I know that my dad sold his Volkswagen Bug, and I believe it was about $3,500. He sold it for.
Did he love this Bug?
He loved his Bug. I mean, he was a school teacher. He was a math teacher. My dad was a math teacher. My mom was a French literature teacher, and they believed that the war would fizzle out. They'd get to come back. They were just going to visit, but they wanted to take some money with them. And they sold that Bug and came to America.
That was 70s, right?
It was 1977. And things got really bad really fast. So, and back then, they could apply to immigrate because my uncles were already here, my grandfather was already here, and the waiting times were much shorter in the 70s than they are now. You know, waiting to get your citizenship now could take 10, 15 years, 20 years. Back then, it was only six months. You would get permanent residence, and then a few years later, you could be naturalized in. And I'm going to tell this story because God rest his soul, I love my grandfather. He got his permanent residence probably about 40 years ago, and he decided, sadly, a year before he passed, that he wanted his citizenship because there was a really important vote that he wanted to vote on here for president.
I think you were telling me about this.
Yeah. And so he asked me to help him study for the test, and he studies and prepares, and he'd been here long enough that he could have someone come in with him and translate. And I didn't have to translate anything for him, but I got to sit in with him and listen to the examiner ask him questions, and he was so proud. When he learned that my grandfather had spent a lot of time in Texas, the examiner says to him, you know, Texas was the only state that had its own president, and he just knew. He stood up and was like, "That's right, Sam Houston was the president," and he passed his test, got sworn in, and voted that one vote, and then he passed, and you know, that's been a part of my life for 40 years, watching members of my family immigrate, understand what it means to assimilate, and we tell people who immigrate to the U.S., it ain't easy here. You don't come to America and get rich. That's not how it works.
Get rich slow versus get rich quick, I think.
You can get rich anywhere in the world.
Yep.
It's all the same way. Hard work, grinding, really putting in the effort to recognize what services are needed in the community you live in. And I believe if you lead with service, the money will follow. And
interesting. So you're saying not just by going out there thinking about money, but if you think about, and this is something I'd like to pass along to the listeners, is that you're saying that if you just lead with service, so whatever your business is, if you're leading with service, you're saying money's a byproduct of that.
That, you know what? And I didn't know that when I started. I had to reflect on that. Why am I more successful than many other firms in many other counties in Washington? Why? We lead with service. And we think about service more broadly. You know, a lot of people think lawyers only give legal advice. We believe in legal care. Legal care is much broader than just giving them the advice, the proverbial take 2 pills and see me in the morning if it still feels bad. We look at root problems. We look at systemic problems, and we work on those so that we can find sustainable solutions for people. And I realized that was the service. I led with that service, and I consistently did it. And I made sure that the people that were on board with us believed in that mission, and the money followed. It didn't follow, it chased.
Interesting. Not followed, but chased.
It chased.
So
It couldn't wait to catch up. It wanted to be with us. That's my relationship with money. I don't chase it, it chases me.
So we're going to jump into that a little bit further down the road. I want to talk about 1990.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in Houston. Your family has a business that you were involved in, and this is before you came up here to Bellingham, so Whatcom County.
Mm-hmm.
What was the business like? This was kind of your first introduction to business, which was gas station.
It was gas station.
Tell me about this.
So actually, my dad had a gas station that had a laundromat in it.
That's a double whammy.
My mom tells the story about saving all the quarters from the laundry machine and putting a down payment on their own gas station. So they had leased out a gas station business, and they ran the laundromat and saved the money from there to put a down payment on a different gas station. And my uncle was a visionary in the business world, and he could see trends happening. And he and his brother and my dad and one of their business partners from Houston, they built a chain of stores, about 56 gas stations.
56 gas stations.
56.
And this is all across Texas, or is this outside of Texas as
This
well?
is in the Houston area. Houston, 6 million people live in Houston. So 56 gas stations sounds like a lot, but for Whatcom County it is. But for Houston, it's just one side of town. But not really. Not really.
So how do you do that? So you go from one, it's
Well,
basically getting your foot in the door on one. How do you start up a gas station? How do you get a gas station business rolling?
Here's my experience with it. Here's my experience with it, because that was my uncle. He was willing to take bold moves, and he was passionate, and he learned that business. My Uncle Sam, who still runs the Starvin' Sam's chain here in Whatcom County, he still got one of his first paychecks from a 7-Eleven store. And I believe he is proud that he worked and learned and moved on from there. But I think he would be a better person to tell that story. The story my experience with it was, my dad would let me go to work with him at 12 years old and pump full serve, because he pumped full serve. And then it was my turn, and I would just pump full serve, and I'd get paid in a bag of chips and some dip, right? Not chew, but like potato chips, right? And then when things grew, they had offices, high-rise offices, and we got to answer the phones and direct the phone calls. And
there's a problem. I'm going to direct you to my brother.
I can't believe they trusted us to do that. I don't know who must have been calling. It must have been that important, because we were still young answering these calls. And then, mid-'80s, the oil business just really tanked in Houston. And my uncle had already seen the opportunity up here along the border.
So this is like mid-'80s. He's seeing the
early 80s. He'd already started to drive up the coast looking for new opportunities. He knew that it was going to cycle in Houston and Texas, and when it did that, it was gonna be better somewhere else. And he thought it would be better up here in Whatcom County.
So 1990. So it sounds like he came up here.
He came up here,
and
in the
then
early
your family
80s,
followed.
and we followed in 1990, 10 years.
1990,
later.
1 year before I was born. This is Whatcom County in 1990.
Yeah.
You came up here, and you were just at the age of getting ready to go to college. Is that right?
Yeah, 17 and a half.
And you went to Western.
Went to Western.
Tell me about Western.
Yeah, I love Western.
What did you study at Western?
I love Western. I have so many good feelings about that university, probably because it was a really good time in my life. All my family was close. We were really tight. I had probably 25, 30 family members, spent a lot of time together. But I'd go up to school, study my accounting classes, come home. Did that for my full 3.5 years. I always say accountants aren't boring. It's just that you have to study so much. You don't have a lot of social life after that. But I studied accounting at Western and didn't do much other than
just school. So were you meeting people here in the community, or were you just doing your thing? You were just head down.
I was going to Canada. We had more friends in Canada than we did down here. It was amazing. We would just cross the border, and this whole other world opens up over there. It's a different world. I mean, it's a metropolitan. Vancouver
Yep.
is right there. But we made a lot of friends out in the county. We made a lot of friends out across the border. You know, Abbotsford and Mission and those places are not much different than being out in the county. So
Yeah.
we would just
a a blank line that goes across a map, and
Yeah.
it's the same land, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. So okay, so you're up here, you're going to school.
Mm-hmm.
You finished in four years, I believe.
Yeah, it took me.
Three and a
I
half
had
years?
some credits, so
Yeah.
about 3.5 years I was done, and then I had 6 months off before I started law school.
So, and you went to SU. So you went to Seattle.
Yeah, it was University of Puget Sound when I started, and they
Yep.
had just sold it off to Seattle University. So the campus was in Tacoma. I spent 3 years in Tacoma, which that was an experience too, because you know Tacoma had a bad reputation.
Yep.
And it's changed so much, really. It's really come a long way. That town's come a long way. Today, I was reading an article about the Tacoma Municipal Court taking the Tacoma Court taking action to help people remove their debts, their court fines that are discretionary. The mandatory ones are still there. And it's just a great way of kind of saying we want our community to come out of all of this crime and the burdens of all these fines.
The
And getting-
refresh almost. Yeah.
Yeah, just a
Very nice.
refresh.
Yeah.
But when I finished law school, I came back to Bellingham.
And was that pretty similar at law school? Was it just head down, kind of doing your thing, studying, not a whole lot of social life, but you had this mission of getting through the schooling to get to what your bigger cause was after school?
Yeah, I think I was head down, get through it, and not really experiencing a lot of life at that time. I was making good friends I still have with me till today, but I wasn't out there doing the things that maybe other college kids would do, like taking trips and.
Oh, I thought you were you're pointing fingers over here at me, like the things that college kids would do, right? We'll get into that in a little bit, how we met. But
no, that's not that. I'm just saying that I look now at the diversity of experiences college students are encouraged to have, and I probably support that, because if I started practicing law when I finished at 24, I would have wrecked my reputation. I would have ruined it. It would have been immediate failure, because I didn't have a perspective on the world yet. That was a mature perspective on the world yet. I was still a kid wanting to explore more. I was 24. But I was a very well-educated 24-year-old kid with a pretty good head on his shoulders, and I came back to town thinking, who are my peers in Bellingham?
So you went from Bellingham to Tacoma, which was in a really rough place at that time.
Yeah.
Bellingham. What was that transition going from Bellingham to Tacoma to back to Bellingham? Was it like dunking your head in cold water and coming back out? Like, what is that like?
For me, it wasn't different, because I was just submerged in the same water, which is school.
Yeah.
And it just was more school, and I was good at school, so it didn't change much. I bunkered down and did what I needed to do. I got a little bit arrogant, though. I thought, I could pass this.
Because you weren't used to failing at all.
No.
You were used to just cruising through school, and then
Yeah.
you get to this point where you go to take your bar.
Yeah.
And what happened?
And so I'm like, man, I passed everything they had to throw at me. Why would I need to study for a bar exam? And I didn't study for a bar exam. I had a really nice summer after law school was over.
How'd the first one go?
I bombed. I failed the substantive part of the law, and I barely just a few points away from passing, but I failed the ethics part of it too. So there's two parts of the test, and the test has changed since I was in law school, and now it's completely different even. But that was humbling. I was 25, and I looked at myself and I said, you're not taking life seriously enough. It's been too easy for you. Life's been way too easy for you. And it was really easy.
So you had been used to just being, as my mom would call it, a whiz in school.
Yeah.
You were used to those things coming easily, and you had kind of a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Besides being humbling, what else did you feel with the failure part of it, and how did you deal with that failure on the first time? And I don't mean to lead us going forward, because
I was pretty down on myself, really depressed on myself. I had split up with my fiance at the time, and I'd failed the exam, and I knew how much had been invested in my education, and I thought very little of myself. then. But I wasn't destroyed.
So there was something left. There was a flame left. And so how did you take that moment right there on the first time that you failed the bar exam and pick yourself back up and rebuild your confidence, go back after it so you could take it again?
I focused on one thing at a time.
Yep.
And that was, I'd gained a bunch of weight in law school. I'm like, you need to lose some weight. So I started working out more. And if you talk to people who knew me back then, they're like, Ziad was working out 3 hours, 4 hours a day.
Just pumping iron. Only just bicep curls, or were you just the beach stuff?
Yeah, no, I was 375 pounds.
Wow.
375. There was no beach body. I wasn't trying to get a beach body. I was trying to get a healthy body.
Yeah.
And I lost 135 pounds over 3 years.
It's amazing.
Yes, but I still failed the bar exam again.
So this is number 2.
Over 3 years, I failed it probably 4 more times.
So you failed it 4 times, and let's talk a little bit about persistence, and let's talk about how did this experience with something that I would consider you to be one of the best at what you do here in the area, if not the state, if not a large area.
Yeah. Well, the bar exam doesn't define how great a lawyer I am. I'll never let that define how great a lawyer I am, and I knew that then. I just knew I couldn't live my dream until I passed that exam.
So what did you do to pass it?
I buckled down and I'd study.
You studied for once.
But I had bills to pay, so I didn't have the time to study after that. The first time I didn't take it seriously. The other times it's because I didn't have time to study. I had to work. I had to pay some bills.
And I was borrowing.
I got a job at Whatcom Community College because I was looking around feeling like I didn't have any peers in Bellingham. I was 24. At 24, kids are still trying to figure out what their major is at Western. And I'm moving on, trying to get a professional career started. So I was going to leave town. And I was going to move back to Texas and maybe move to San Antonio.
Maybe get back into the oil business, maybe do something. No way.
I was probably going to go back down there and work in a practical accounting job until I could practice law down there.
That doesn't sound like you.
No.
So you were teaching accounting classes, and there were people in there that were your age, maybe younger, but also people that were older than you.
Well, let me tell you how I got that job.
Tell me about it.
At the same time I'm thinking about leaving, I see this advertisement for a job at Whatcom for an accounting instructor. I'd never taught a class except for me. I was a teacher's assistant in criminal law in law. I'd done so well that they let me be a teacher's assistant in law school. But I hadn't had any other teaching experience. And I wanted that job, and I wrote a letter to them explaining why I wanted that job. And the letter says, and I'll never forget it, I want a chance to influence my future peers. It was my opportunity to intervene in the problem I saw, which is, where are my peers at 20? If I'm an educated 24-year-old young person here or young professional, who are my peers? Do they have to be 40 and 50 to be my peers? So I went looking for them, and I knew that the students at Whatcom were likely to stay in Whatcom. They weren't running from their parents in Seattle to come up to college.
To Western like I did, right?
Well, I think kids who go to university take off from Bellingham to go to university somewhere else so they can get away.
Right.
Well, I know the kids that go to Whatcom are going to stay in Whatcom, and I wanted a chance to influence them. And so I wrote this letter, got an interview, and they said to me at the end of the interview, which I recommend this to all of my students, and I'll recommend it to anyone listening to this podcast, never leave an interview without asking this question. When I thank you for the time you've taken to interview me, what reservations will you have about hiring me? And you get an answer there that's either going to be, they're just going to shine you on and give you some BS answer, or they're going to tell you, here are your deficiencies. And you can learn from that, and you get some feedback, and you can learn from it. And I asked that question, and they said, you don't have a lot of teaching experience, but your enthusiasm is contagious.
So I just want to take a pause right there and dive right into that, because that's super fascinating. If you ask that question, what would you say would be an indicator of someone like you don't have the job versus like, yeah, we have a few reservations, but here's your opportunity?
I don't know if there is one indicator that I've recognized or picked up on, but I do pick up that people are either going to say, well, we have several candidates to interview, and we're just going to give everybody a chance, and we'll give you a call back. And that doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell me what my downside is.
Right.
And then there's the people who I'll never forget, the people who interviewed me. Jane Gordon Ball was an instructor in the accounting department over there, and she interviewed me and said, Ziad, you don't have a lot of teaching experience. We know you know the material, but we don't know if you can deliver it well. And that's a great thing to recognize, because if I didn't know how to teach it, it would have been horrible.
Because it doesn't matter if you know it. If you can't communicate it to people, then it doesn't matter.
They offered me a business math class at Whatcom. I couldn't do it. I couldn't teach math.
Yeah.
But I could teach accounting.
So tell me about this experience. You're basically doing this because you needed a job. You wanted to find your peers. Mm-hmm. You're trying to make some money so you could pay for law school.
Yeah.
So you could take your bar exam.
Yeah. So many of my students who still see me in the community are like, did you finally pass that bar exam? It's been 25 years or something now.
Yeah.
And they're like, did you finally pass that bar exam? I'm like, yeah, I did. I finally passed. I've been practicing for 16 years now.
I have business now. Yeah.
It's great. It's great because it was such a part of my story. And teaching is so therapeutic for me. It's an opportunity to give something back. And then I taught for 17 years. So all these years later, I actually see my students who are my peers now. And I can run into people who I taught years ago who now are like, Kyle Morris over at the Hub. I love Kyle. I love what he does. And back then when he was in class, he was talking about what he was going to do. He was probably already doing it, but he was talking about what he wanted to do. And now I consider Kyle a peer.
You found your peers.
He teaches me things. I learn from him. He learns from me. Yes. Then here's how the cycle goes when you teach. They go from being your peers to being your mentors. How about the ones that went all the way through school, became lawyers, and now I get advice from them, like Emily Mowry. Emily Mowry took my business law class 16 years ago or 15 years ago and is now teaching my business law class and runs a very successful business law practice here in Whatcom County. And I can name several more, but I saw that cycle. What I wrote down became true. I wrote down that I want to influence my future peers, and I did. And they're here in the community now. Which takes me back. Let me just
jump into it. This is
why we're going to write this down.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put it out there like a megaphone. Let's write down that we want our community to be free from discrimination, free from hate, and let's write it down in our deeds. Let's write it down in our leases. Don't sign a lease unless they add the inclusion deed language. And we're going to give it to you next week. We're going to put it out there. Don't sign on a house unless the deed has the inclusion deed language. If you want to see your community free from hate and discrimination on the basis of race, sex, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, physical ability, mental ability, then ask for that language in your deed, because when you put it down in writing, it manifests 20 years later. And that's what I want to see. I want to see a community free from hate. I want to help impact the community I live in.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about impacting your community now. So you've taught all these years. You're seeing your peers come around. You have this just amazing megaphone. Mm-hmm. And I keep saying megaphone because that's what you have. You have this immense impact on the law community, the legal community, other business owners, your friends, your family, your peers, all of the above. Let's talk about like how did this megaphone start? You started when I met you. I met you in this. There was this little house.
It's still there.
Ohio,
it's still
right?
there. Yeah, on the corner of Ohio and Franklin Street. There is a little cabin. That used to be owned. Used to be a home in the 40s. When there was nothing around it besides hay fields. And that little house was my office. That little cabin turned into my office in 2003 when my brother and I bought that property. And since then, we've expanded into the warehouse space next door. 8 paralegals, a paralegal training academy, and a technology company, all on the corner of Ohio and Franklin Street. And all these years later, I've come back and set up my
back
office
in the same
and that's that little cabin
where I see you.
And I'm there. I spend my days there, and it's my little think tank, and it's a great sanctuary for so many people who come in and share with me their problems and concerns. and we design a strategy for getting them a remedy in court that hopefully is sustainable, something that works for them, keeps them out of the system. But that was a slow process. That was, when I first started practicing law in 2003, I passed the bar exam.
That was the year.
Oh, I was jumping out of my skin. That feeling of knowing that now I can live my dream, I'll never forget that feeling. But in 2003, I was only making $750 practicing law a month. And I was making $1,000 teaching. And I was borrowing $1,000 from my parents so I could pay loans and live. And I was living in their basement.
So you started out in this place where, and we talked a little bit about this before, but a lot of people have shame in borrowing and shame and I think we had
living in their parents' basement.
And living in
Let's
their
talk about that.
Yeah, tell me
I
about
got
that.
no shame in that.
Yeah.
There's no shame in saving money.
Yeah.
There's no shame in doing what you got to do to pay your bills.
Yeah.
There's no shame in putting some hard work in. And here's the thing. I was spoiled. I was entitled. I was that bratty kid. I know that I had privileges other people did not have. But I recognize that the only time I ever got ahead was when I decided to lead with service. So when you ask me how I got there, it's because I put my head down and served. I taught my students. I served my clients. I looked at what it is I needed to learn so I could serve better. And I led with that and I grew. And the impact, the influence that I have, it was easy. I didn't realize how I'd get here. When I was 24 and 25 and I had doubts and insecurities, which doubts and insecurities can come in. Let's
talk about those. What are some of your doubts and insecurities about at that point in your life?
My doubts right now, am I doing too much?
What does that mean?
Am I doing too much? Am I ignoring my family? Am I not spending enough time with my parents? Am I not spending enough time with my wife? Am I involved in my brother's life enough to make it meaningful? Do I give enough time to the things that are outside of my practice to make it balanced?
The grounding pieces, right?
Yeah. Are they grounding pieces or is the service grounding? Which one is it? Those are some of my doubts, right? But I follow my instincts now. I have a lot of clarity about what my intuition and my instincts are, and I just follow them. I don't drink. I don't do a lot of drugs. I like to eat, but I don't even eat very bad. I don't like to put poor things in my body anymore. And that gives me a lot of clarity about what my instincts are telling me, and I follow them. And this is something I knew when I was 6 years old. When I was 6 years old or 7 years old, and I knew I wanted to be president, that was an instinct, and I had no fear that clouded that because I'm 6. When you're 6, you don't have them. At 4 and 5 years old,
something happens where we get crushed by the pressures of society.
Yes, because you've lived long enough to be a part of someone else's story, and they're clouding you with their story, and now you're starting to have their fears be your fears, and you're no longer trusting your own instincts. And by the time you're 25, you're so lost down that path, you don't even know what your identity is. And I feel when I look at you, Leo, I feel so inspired.
Likewise,
because you have identified some of that clarity sooner than I did, so I know how much farther you're going to go, and I'm not worried that I'm not going to go far enough. I just feel like, man, if I had this clarity when I was in my 20s, boy, how much further I could do, where I could go from there. But it's very simple. Take away all those fears. Don't cloud your mind so that you can listen to your instincts and lead with service and grow. The growth comes naturally. It's kind of like letting the light come to a flower and the water come to a flower, because it's gonna grow by itself if you just let those two things happen. And that's what moving away the clouds so the light comes over onto that flower.
So you looked internally and you started removing the clouds in your mind, in your body, in your soul, all these things. And then so when I first met you, it was in that cabin. I'm not going to discuss why, or I can discuss why. I'm not ashamed of it either. But the whole purpose is I came to Ziad for legal service, and it was in that specific cottage. And then as our friendship grew and as I got to know you better and as time went on, Next thing I know, this guy's taking over the whole block. Tell me about how by leading with service, you just started inching your way down the block.
Well, I never intended to inch my way across the block. What I intended to do was what I wanted to do.
And what is that?
And what I wanted to do was deliver legal care better than anyone else had seen it.
So what's
And that don't mean I'm a better
Yeah.
lawyer than every other lawyer that's out there, but I'm delivering legal care that no one else is doing right now.
So what's the standard, and what does it mean to deliver the best legal care?
The standard is to give legal advice, find the best argument, zealously defend your client for the most ruthless outcome you can get.
That's the standard.
That's not sustainable, though. That's not sustainable at all, because the ruthless outcome enables your client to come right back. That's like giving them 2 pills and telling them to come back, right? But the better version of legal care is the one that looks at the systemic problems your client is facing and deals with those while we deal with the acute problems. And I talk about this like it's medicine because I see the analogy. In medicine, there are acute problems. They're happening immediately. They need to be addressed immediately. Great. But you're not serving your client very well if you're not also looking at the deeper cause of their issues, the systemic cause of their issues, and working in ways to alleviate those so that they don't come back. And that takes time. That takes time to build up enough understanding of what that big picture looks like in this one field. So I can't master real estate law. I'm not even close to a master of estate planning and probate and these many other areas. But when it comes to understanding my DUI client, I understand them very well.
And when you understand them, what is it that defines that client?
Well, they don't all fit the same definition, but I understand what happens to many people who misjudge how much they had to drink. I understand what happens to people who start to drink and forget that they're probably being a little bit reckless, and that's why they had a drink. I mean, many times people come in, they've had some triggering event in their life. They just broke up with somebody, or they just lost their job, and they're feeling a little bit more reckless. So they go out and take more chances that they wouldn't ever take in their life, never had any criminal record, and then they get a little reckless about it. Or they come in and they just misjudged. They were out at a fundraiser or at a party, and they had one glass of wine followed by another, and then it was 30 minutes later, they're over the limit, and things are much more strict than they were 20 years ago. Or there are, about 20% of the time, people who are genuinely struggling with addiction. 20%. Not everybody who gets a DUI is an addict. Not everybody who picks up a drug offense is an addict. Some kids don't even realize that selling Adderall to their friends, or even giving Adderall to their friends, is a serious felony.
It's a felony. Yeah.
Yeah. But now Adderall goes around at the universities as a study pill.
Yeah.
Right? And in that same culture, Molly is the same thing.
And for our listeners, can you tell us a little bit more about what Adderall is and what Molly is?
Adderall is an amphetamine. It's an upper. It's a speed. It gives you hyper focus. But it's a drug. It's an amphetamine. And that amphetamine is a schedule. I don't know where it falls on that, but it's a controlled substance, and you can only have it with a prescription.
It's interesting because there's also another drug that ends with amphetamine.
It's the same almost molecular structure with one or two exceptions, and I don't know the science exactly, but the methamphetamine and amphetamine, it's not much different.
So you've got one controlled substance that people don't really understand, and then you've got this other substance that's not controlled. But tell me a little bit more about that, just for education purposes.
Well, methamphetamine is still controlled, but it's illegal. There's no way of getting it with a prescription or without, and that's the synthetic drug. That's a speed. It's speed, and they've refined it for the prescription version. And people take both, but students share their prescriptions, and that gets them in so much trouble. And when I also notice that students they're not thinking through the big picture. They're just, well, this is like drinking. I'm gonna do some Molly.
It affects my general state of being.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to
go for
try.
it.
This is when I should do it, right? Well, I don't know when the last generation was when people were forgiving of that, but we still don't live in a generation where it's forgiving. The good news is our elected prosecutor in Whatcom County has publicly said that the war on drugs is over and
What
the
does that
government
mean?
lost.
What does that mean?
Well, that's
How powerful is that?
well, how powerful? It's only as powerful as we apply it. And he's put out new policies that recommend and encourage drug court for people with addiction. They recommend and encourage non-prison based outcomes where people have to take accountability for their drug possession, but they're not necessarily going to prison for it like they were when the war on drugs was actively.
You made
happening.
a choice, but you're not going to ruin your life.
That's right. That's right. Well, and it just, you're not going to go to prison on every single one of these things that used to be long prison sentences for. And I'm very encouraged that we're moving in a direction in our criminal justice system that is geared toward treatment and recovery and rehabilitation versus just locking people up.
And judgment and condemnation, right?
Yeah, and there's plenty of room for that. Well, there are plenty serious offenses where that happens, but in these drug offenses, I think we're making progress and getting people to see that there's mental health issues, there are addiction issues that need to be addressed, and that's part of looking at legal care. And so what we'll do is we'll help people get insurance to pay for their treatment, because you can't take advantage of some of these programs without the treatment. Or we'll help them make some arrangements in their life so that they can take some time off work and do the inpatient treatment that they're supposed to do.
So legal care, let's talk about the pillars of your business, because really at the end of the day, you're leading with service.
Yes.
But it's also a business. Like you have to and especially when you first started, you had to make money to keep the lights on or keep the basement lights on.
That's right.
So originally, your first you were doing kind of all of these things. You were doing the educating part. You were doing the legal care part. You were doing the recommendation part. You were doing all of it.
Yeah.
So how did you what was that moment like for you when you were sitting in your cottage and it was you and others in that small space? Now it's just you, and you decided that you were going to start kind of leveraging out. Let's talk a little bit about leverage and what that does for the quality of service in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the journey I took. It was, I just need help keeping up with the number of people who would like to get our service.
Because you had a high level of service.
Yes, and I wanted to keep that standard there. I wanted to keep that high level, so I brought people on to help, and I wanted to grow. I wanted to grow because you're not going to master unless you grow. So if I only did 1 or 2 cases at a time, I'd never really master my craft. I'd never do it. I wanted to grow. I wanted to master it. So I challenged myself to grow. And I did that with service, and then I brought people on to help me grow. But here's how I would sum up why my business is as effective as it is. About 3 years ago, not 10 years ago. So I'm not that old in this, realizing what it takes to run a very successful business. About 3 years ago, I sat everybody down and said, do you believe in the mission?
And what's the mission?
The mission is leveraging technology to deliver better legal care with the limited number of resources we have. Do you believe in that mission? And the folks that stuck around believed in that mission. And then the next question was, where do you find your leadership? What do you find in this work that is meaningful so that you can become a leader in that position? So the next question was, what do you find that's meaningful in this work? Because if I'm having you do something you don't find meaningful, you can't get passionate about, you're not going to lead.
There's no point.
There's no point. And so it took me a few years of filtering through those questions to get people in the right positions. And
that was some tough conversations. That means that you're having conversations where people are saying, I don't actually love what I do, and I don't believe in the mission. And it's a great mission.
That's right.
But not everyone.
That's right.
So what is that like?
And, or how about this?
Yeah.
I love what I do. I would love to do it in this position. Sorry, that position is not available. And so that means there's no room for you here. That's a tough one.
So people left.
They had to.
Yeah.
because I couldn't offer them what they wanted in their life. And that would be unfair to not let them go.
So you
because
grew.
they're gonna sit there and do something they don't find meaningful because I don't have a position for them in the place that they do. There's already somebody there doing that, and they're doing it well, like leaders. So let them go find their leadership role in that meaningful place. That's a tough one because they're great, they're dedicated, but they're not in the position that they're going to be most effective in.
So this is 3 years ago. You had this moment where you had grown. You had grown. You had created the legal school.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember coming up there when you first started up there, which was awesome. You were super excited, showing me all the desks and everything.
That's right.
And then you had these different parts. You had the technology. You had the school. You had what you wanted to do, but you basically grew, and then realized you're at a point where you said, well, I need to make sure people are in the right places in their head and their soul and like what their craft is.
Yeah.
So you let some people go, you moved some people around, you moved yourself around.
I did.
Tell me more about you moving yourself around to grow.
Well, I got to tell you, they hated it when I came around because I was still used to doing everything. And they're like, "What? You're going to tell us? You're going to tell us that we're leaders in this position, then you're going to come over here and tell us how to do it." Well, that doesn't work. You can't tell a leader how to do their position. I had to step back. And fortunately, my staff, they say in law firms, there's a lot of turnover. I have not experienced that my entire career.
Why do they say that?
I was surprised. Because lawyers are ruthless. Get what you're going to get. It's yours. Eat what you kill. That's the standard of practice. Eat what you kill. That's how we refer to bringing cases in. You get paid on what you bring in. Well, that doesn't. If you're not being fed, if you're not growing, if you're not creating an environment where the folks in your firm can grow, then they're going to leave. And so I would say the reason I've had longevity in my firm is that I've created a place for my staff to grow. And my senior associate's been with me over 10 years now. My DUI supervisor has been with me for over 6 years now. My senior staff have been with me over 10 years now. And that's because we figured out how to create growth for them.
And culture.
And the culture is about learning and evolving. And I understand, and I want to see them grow out of their position. I don't want to see them stuck in their position. So, I've read this quote. I can't remember who it was, but it was, if you're really good at what you do, you're never going to get promoted. Right? Because you're so good at that position.
I like that.
So I used to joke with
people. It was quoted by you. It's you that said that.
Well, I said it now.
So we're going to quote it as you.
Yeah. Well, and so now I'm like, well, there's plenty of room for promotion. Don't ever think you're so good at your position. But so here's the plan. I'm going to put it out there. We have 3 levels of paralegals in our firm.
What are those levels?
Lawyers. Yeah. So each person's writing out job descriptions, but each level manages information in a different way. Because essentially that's what paralegals do, is they make sure that the information that's being brought into the firm is synthesized in the most effective way for the next person up the chain. Okay. So whether it's a phone call at the lead at level 1 where someone's asking questions about licensing and they have to put that question together and move it to the right division of the firm. Moving on, it's about what they do with the information.
All to give the best service back to the client.
Absolutely, because you're giving the information to the person who's most passionate about it. I'm not going to give licensing questions to the felony attorney that does murder cases, right? Those are going to go to the licensing division. You have to put them in the best hands for people to get the best outcome. But here's the thing. In Washington, after getting your bachelor's degree, you can mentor under an attorney for 4 years and become a lawyer.
And this is what you're talking about with your legal school.
That's right. That's right. Because what we'll do is we will then train paralegals, find them jobs, encourage them to finish their bachelor's degree, and then they can mentor under an attorney for about $15,000 for the whole program versus $200,000 to go to law school, right?
Big difference.
And become a lawyer. Now, you do that while you're working as a paralegal.
So you're getting actual like vocational on hands-on.
So what we're doing with
Yeah.
our paralegals from level 1 is we're like, start working on your. So we train them at the academy. They come in and work at level 1 position, and then we're encouraging them to continue on and do some online courses or take some classes, get their associates, get their bachelor's degree, and once they get their bachelor's degree, they've moved up, and now we can mentor them to become lawyers.
It's beautiful.
Isn't that a great idea? Right? And then my lawyers
Thinking creatively, it's outside the box.
and now we're creating a model we can take across the country.
So, if you don't mind, can I take a step back before we jump into that?
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that moment where, and I saw the look on your face when you talked about the moment where you said, you can't grow as a leader if I'm telling you what to do with your job. Can you give some sort of advice? What would you tell that business owner that has that, like, I built this is my thing, like, I need to have some sort of creative input on this? What would you tell that person, what that moment was like for you to realize that I can't help this person grow until I take a step back? Let's give some advice to the people that are listening for that.
Here's what I say.
Yeah.
If you truly understand your craft, then you should recognize that in order for it to grow, you need to have a broader campaign than simply one customer at a time. And if you don't step back and start dealing with the broader community, if you don't take a step back and trust that the people you have trained, who have your firm's core mission at number one when they're at work, if you don't trust them to do their job as leaders, then you probably shouldn't have hired them in the first place, because you don't want to grow. And second of all, you're going to do more important work than one customer at a time. You're going to go do the bigger, broader work.
Grow the world.
You have to in order to send that message that you want to make an impact. But here, I don't want businesses that are just there. They're going to take money out of the community and leave. I don't want to see that. I'm not a fan of that. I like to buy local when I can, but I understand people can't always afford to buy local. I get that too. But if I'm a business, I want a business that's there to make a difference in the community. I want a business that's there that's going to say, I want these young kids that are going to school around me to look at us as a role model for what you can do in your community and how you can be profitable at it. There's no shame in making a profit. I've had no shame. But I would tell that business owner, if you step back, you're going to have a bigger impact on your business than if you stay buried in.
So you're saying your job is not necessarily to tell someone what to do, but more so to find out what their roadblocks are and help them either learn to fish or remove those roadblocks and just get out of their way.
Yeah, thanks for the fishing one, because you just reminded me. I tell people now that my staff is directing the ship. I'm directing the waves.
Tell me more about, what does that mean?
Well, I'm looking where they're coming from. And I'm creating momentum in another way to make sure that the waves are going in my direction. That's exactly my job right now. My job is to not be focused on what direction to steer the ship, because I have great people who know how to steer and captain the ship and take care of the ship and the people that are on the ship and the people that get on board for the journey of the ship. It's my job to look at where the waves are coming from. And if I see a wave coming from one direction and I can start making some momentum in this way to deflect that wave or to make sure that we get turned in the right direction of that, that's my job. If you truly mastered your craft, then you will see the trends coming in your industry, and you will work to steer your ship and your business into those trends. But if you're buried in the ship, you're not going to see those trends. And you have a responsibility, if you want it to be sustainable, to look for those trends. I think that's the advice I'd give the owner, because that's what I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing that now I can look at, where is the legal industry coming?
And that only comes from leverage too. That only comes from truly giving leaders, empowering leaders to take those parts of the ship over to then be able to look at the bigger picture and look at the bigger issue, which is why I'm so impressed by what you guys have done with technology. Tell me a little bit about what you guys have done.
I want to tell you. I was going to segue right into that. I'm going to say one more thing about leveraging.
Do it.
Because it's very scary for businesses to take on more employees. It's a bigger expense. There's more to take on. And you can look at it that way if you're hiring people who just want a paycheck from you. But what I tell my paralegals is, even if you don't work for me, you go to interview with someone else, you don't ask that person for a paycheck. You tell them why you're adding value to their firm and why bringing you on adds value to their firm. And the people that I bring on are adding value to my firm. They're not just taking a paycheck from the firm. They're adding value to it. And when we do our holiday parties and I look around and I see the families that are thriving because we're succeeding, I feel so good. I want to do more. I want to hire everybody, but I want a reason to hire everybody. I want to know that we're adding value and people are coming to us to do that. And if you hire the right people, they add value. So you know, there's a lot of talk. I'm gonna switch over to the technology because
lay it on me.
What I've been looking at is this trend of technology in every industry, and that's been over the last 10 or 15 years. You know, I talked to a patent lawyer this week about some projects we're working on, and some of the ideas that I thought were so original were patented in '99. Leo, '99.
And no one ever did anything with them,
right? No, they did things with them. They did.
Yeah.
But they were different. It was a different application to them in '99 than you can apply to them now. So it's not like it's original, but that's how long technology's already been influencing us. Some people would say since the '90s it's been influencing us. And they've been talking since the '90s how artificial intelligence is going to replace lawyers or replace professionals for most of what they do. And artificial intelligence is doing a lot of things like geofencing. It's already telling us where people are going. We're sending out emails simply based on where people are located, right? That's amazing technology. But we're using technology to make it more efficient for lawyers. So our practice management software helps us manage our client contacts, our documents. It helps us manage our calendar, and all of that is centralized into one.
And this is something
system.
that you created?
No, we didn't create that. That's Clio practice management software out of Vancouver, British Columbia. It's a great. It's the leading on cloud-based practice management software for lawyers, but we develop add-ons to their.
So your
software.
app. You're talking about your app?
Where our app is an add-on to that. Yeah.
Tell me about your app that you created.
So our app that we currently use right now is our infraction app, where you can submit a traffic infraction online to us at the MyTrafficMan website, and you just click Fight Your Ticket, submit your ticket, and we assign it to one of our affiliates in the state. And that was another thing I learned. I don't need an office in every corner of the state. I just need a good sister office in every corner of the state, where someone who already believes in the work as much as I do is doing great work and maintains an office there, and we just collaborate to bring resources to them in exchange for them doing the good work that they do for our clients.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. It saves so much on brick and mortar maintenance.
And I've used this app, by the way. I drive really fast. I have a lead foot, and
Yeah.
I didn't even know. I didn't know that the app was there yet. So I think I texted you, and you just sent me the app, and I signed in, did it. It was super easy. So and this is a total shameless plug because it worked for me really well.
Yeah.
I just took a picture of my ticket,
Yeah.
sent it in. It was taken care of. It was very
we get
easy.
you an email. We let you know it's all done. Here's the thing. Here's what happens after you send it in. We order up reports. We review them. We look for legal issues. We contact prosecutors if there are prosecutors involved. Try to negotiate a dismissal prior to court. Or if we think that it's a more risky case, try to negotiate a better outcome like a reduction in the ticket. And if none of that works, then we go to court for you and fight the ticket. Right? Now that process is a few hours. So tickets cost about $300 to fight. You pay about $700 over 3 years in insurance if you get the ticket on your record. So it's always worth spending the money to have it dismissed or reduced. But the technology we're working on now is going to skim those reports for us and spot legal issues. And you wanted to skim it for specific language, like lead-based paint language or asbestos language. You'd have to flip through the pages to get to the one that said that. And if you had thousands of those where you were looking to see if the lead-based paint language was included in it, then it could take you hours to do that. But the computer, through artificial intelligence, can do that in seconds, in minutes.
Spot all the issues, make it easier for you to digest them.
That's right.
Make you not go cross-eyed, things like that.
We're one checkbox away from being able to go from 3 hours of work to 30 minutes to 3 minutes of work.
And when is this, do
on
you
a
think,
traffic infraction.
when do you imagine this to be completed?
Well, as soon as somebody gives me $100,000.
I'll go write a check. I'll go work
I
on it.
appreciate it, Leo. But we're bootstrapping all the way because it's just a slow process.
Yeah.
To me, it's about changing the industry slowly, because most lawyers would never trust that. Most lawyers are like, well, I'm not going to trust a computer to tell me if that's the proper legal issue. Even though one of the document management companies, software companies, legal document management companies just sold for $440 million.
It's a lot of money.
That means lawyers are trusting it to do the document management that it needs to do through artificial intelligence. It's one step away from teaching a computer how to spot legal issues in a speeding ticket.
Beautiful.
Right? And we bring the price down to $50, not $350. And then you're increasing access to justice because each lawyer can do more for less.
That's amazing. Let me ask you a question. What is your, and this is a very open-ended question, what is your favorite book that you would recommend for other business owners, other people that are wanting to get inspired? What's your book? What is your go-to?
Most people would be surprised that I'm not a big reader. But my favorite book is The E-Myth Attorney. And it originated as The E-Myth in 2001. Michael Gerber wrote a book about putting systems into place and working on your business, not just in your business. And that was a very popular book in 2001. And then later he teamed up with some lawyers and they wrote one for the specific profession, E-Myth Attorney, about what kind of systems you can put in place in your work. And that book, that just lit me up. And I was ready to start looking at what was working in my business and what wasn't. Because what we do is we just get stuck
in the day-to-day grind.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we're not evaluating what's working, what's not working. And when I looked at what was working and what wasn't working, I could filter out what was not working, or at least modify it so it could start working for us. And then I could focus more on what was working. And that was it took me about 14 months to put together my own book on how best to run a legal care center, because it was at the same time. And he suggests you take a weekend off and you put this all down in writing. Well, I took the weekend off and then 14 more months of in-between time just writing down my book. And the book's called The Evolution of a Legal Care Center, and we use it as the textbook from which we train the paralegals, which, by the way, we start class on Monday. We have a
for
class.
For all you guys out there that are looking for this class, it's starting on Monday.
Monday at legalcarecenteracademy.net. Legalcarecenteracademy.net. I think it's too late to enroll for fall, but we have another one in the spring. And you can just come in, take a tour. You can sit in on a class, see if you'd like it. And you can find us online at legalcarecenter.net. I think that I wanted to pass my vision on to other law firms, and I realized I couldn't do that unless I put paralegals that I trained in their law firm with our values in it.
It's
right?
amazing.
We wanted to indoctrinate the law firms, and the best way to do that was to send them good paralegals. That would, and we're getting calls now. My friends call me, Ziad, who's graduating from your program? So I don't even have to push them onto these lawyers. I'm getting calls because there is a demand now for paralegals. There was no demand a few years ago, and it's just turned around.
You turned it around.
I didn't turn it around. I think
you made an impact on it.
Yeah, I saw the trend coming.
Yep.
I saw that 3 years ago, and that was part of me pulling back to see where the trend was. And now, while my friends are struggling to find paralegals, I'm training 3 at a time, 5 at a time in the paralegal program. And that's the difference you can make if you step back and let the people that you trust to lead your ship lead it while you look at the waves that are coming.
I love it. Now, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You're all about mindset. You have so much of what you've done is about mindset. There's this famous question of success and luck and skill. How much of your current success, of the things that you've created with the people around you, with this amazing family that you have, and making a change on a bigger scale, how much of that is attributed in your mind to skill, and how much would you say is attributed to luck?
No luck, skill, and faith. Luck doesn't come into my conversation. Skill and faith. When I doubted my skill, I had faith that I'd catch up to that curve. It's a lot of faith, and I think that here's examples of where people had faith in me, where my skills came through and people had faith in me. In 2003, when I passed the bar, I didn't have enough money to buy an office, but my brother was courageous enough to reach out to Jim O'Brien, whose son just ran for mayor. Garrett had just run for mayor, and big shout out to April Barker for mayor.
Hey, bro.
Now. But so my brother reached out to Jim O'Brien, who owned the property that we're on right now, the one at Ohio and Franklin Street, and said, "Look, we're a couple of guys. My brother's a lawyer. I'm a used car dealer. We get no respect in the world. Right? We want to own or contract on this piece of land." And Jim O'Brien accepted 25% down that we had to borrow from my uncle, and took a chance on us to own or contract because we couldn't go to a bank and get a loan. And that's how we bought that piece of property.
And that's the faith aspect right there.
He had faith in us. He had to have. Otherwise, why would he do that deal? It wouldn't make any sense if he didn't have any faith in us. So there's that part of it. And then we used our skill as best we could. And there were rough times where we almost lost that property. Rough times where we couldn't make the payment. We weren't making enough money to make the payment, and we were going to lose that property. And fortunately, just before we lost the property, my business got to the point where I could buy it outright.
You jumped on it.
And I jumped on it.
I love it.
Yes, and that was a skill. I had to use my skill to do that. And then rather than give up on the property, we had to have faith. We didn't luck out that my credit just got good enough right in time. I used my skill to get my credit up, and I had faith that things would work out. So we toughed it out, and that's what I would suggest to people, that it's a combination of use your skills, understand what you can do, and have faith in the rest. And that kept my blood pressure from going over. This is another piece of advice I got from a good friend. He came to me, he saw me frustrated, and he's like, "What's going on, Ziad?" He's like, "Man, the judge didn't do what I wanted him to do. Prosecutor just wasn't responding to what I wanted them to hear." And he's like, "Oh, I see your problem." "Right, yeah. The judge didn't do what I wanted him to do." He's like, "That's not your problem, Ziad." I'm like, "What's my problem?" He said, "You're trying to control it. You're trying to control it. You think you're in control," is what he said to me exactly. "And you're not in control. You can do the legwork. You can use your skill and do the legwork, and the rest you have to leave to faith." And I felt my blood pressure drop 20 points. And I'm like, "You're so right."
Focus on what you can control.
Not even what you can control. Do the legwork, right? Because control starts to get us in this control mindset. You start to have this like inflated idea of what you can control. Just do the legwork. And what you thought you could, even if you think you could do more, if you didn't do it, guess what? You couldn't do more. Right? Because so if you think you can control it, you're going to expect that you can do all. But the truth is, do the legwork. And if someone asks me, "Well, what's the legwork, Ziad?" It's the work you have to get done until you can no longer do it.
It's just whatever you have to do.
Yeah.
And Ziad, you're one of my favorite people. I want you to know
So are you,
that.
Leo. So are you.
I am so grateful that you took the time to sit down with us today and talk a little bit more about your story, talk a little bit more about you, what got you here. And on social media, MyTrafficMan.net, and then Legal Care Center as well.
Yeah.
And then where can people find you on Instagram and Facebook?
So at MyTrafficMan on Instagram, and they could follow me on Facebook, Ziad Youseff, and I'm on TikTok now, at MyTrafficMan on TikTok.
What?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Jumping on
I'm
it.
kind of silly on TikTok. It's like nobody else is on it that knows me, so I'm a little bit more silly on
So you
TikTok.
can do whatever you want on there.
Yeah, Yeah.
So we all appreciate you at the Cohen Group and at the Bell Pod Network and Building Bellingham. We all really, really appreciate you jumping on the show with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Leo.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers. Cool.